inspire. It's Starfire. It's Starfire.
You stole my heart of gold after my silver soul. Can you dig any deeper now? I gave you all I own, put you on this golden throne, but I'm a little stronger now. You cashed in on my promises. You know I'm too generous. Now I've learned to never help you out, 'cause I'm done cleaning up your mess. Found myself in my regrets. I've become a little stronger now. A little stronger now.
Okay, so let's see where we left off, right? So we wanted to basically say, hey, what's up with this app in general, right? So let me see what we got here. Okay, so we basically have our login, our sign up, and our about, which is empty. So let's maybe put anything in here for now. So if we go to the controllers and say about PHP, then what we probably want to do is to say, hey, what do we actually do here, right? So about HTML, that's our views. Let's put anything in here that makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to simply say, okay, actually let me, as usual, I have no idea. Spectre. You should never use, you know, for tutorials, a front-end framework that you're not familiar with. Let's see how we can basically have a little bit of a basic layout here. Yeah, sure. Why not that one? Oh, hi. I'm hoping. We're going to basically make this installable today and talk about, you know, how would you... So right now we have this in GitHub, and we kind of wonder how people are supposed to actually, if I wanted to reuse this, for example, have databases. So we're probably going to talk about migration today. Okay, but first we quickly want to put something in here. I'm not really sure if that's even what I wanted to look at. Where's like start spacing in position? Makes things relative, and then we have a couple of those. Yeah, this is really like micro. So micro. So let's basically see what we want to do here, right? Let's just steal a component. Let's just steal a component, maybe something like a panel. Yeah. Sure. Why not? We're gonna use this. That'll do. This is in our comments. Let's quickly see how that looks like in general. Yeah, of course, that makes things a little bit boring here. Here, components, task breadcrumbs or navigation. Let's call this about me. And then let's just take something. You know what? We're really gonna steal this. Let's see what they do here. Okay, this is just tabs. Okay, let's actually do this and say, sure. Those will do. And here we have two tabs. One is basically about me, and the other one will be, wait, why is this active? Let's take this out and do this here for now. And say, I don't know, my accounts. And then the rest we're gonna get rid of. And then a panel footer we don't need. Let's see how that looks in general. Sure. Let's do that. There's a little bit of a strange headline, but okay. And so here we come. Now here we finally get to the point where we kind of cannot really avoid JavaScript. So let's make this as vanilla as we can, shall we? So let's quickly create a simple inline script tag here and explore this on a very high level. So apparently we have tab items, right? That's basically what we have. And here we're simply going to make life so much easier by saying like, okay, we are going to have a data target and going to make this, and here we basically have my, this is going to be something with the ID about, and then I'm going to have the ID accounts. Okay, so here I'm going to say about, and here I'm going to say, where are we? Here I'm going to say accounts. So here I'm simply going to place something here like I'm a dev making my way through a cruel world. All right. And here I'm going to have something that I'm also going to steal. Let's get back to why doesn't this not work properly? Let's see what else we can place in here that looks a little bit modals, nav, pagination panels, popovers, tiles. What do tiles look like here? Compact tiles. Not convinced. Let's see. Tooltips, experimentals. Let's go wild. Ooh. Okay. I see. What? What is this even supposed to do? Okay. Of kind of parallax. Oh, in a very different way than I imagined this to be. Okay. Cool, but a little bit of an overkill for us right now. You know what? Let's not. This is not a design thing. Let's create buttons. Super primitive buttons. And here is basically https github.com/ GitHub, and then I don't know, Twitch. Okay. I'm just guessing that we will want to have at least this as a super primitive way of looking at it. Yeah. Okay, and here we need to kind of the same. Okay, so this P we're probably also going to have with a margin, just a general margin too. Okay, so as you can see, of course, both are visible right now. And what we kind of want to do is to say, well, now that depends, right? So what we are going to do is to basically say, what do they have in common? Wait, why is the active up here? And this is a class active. Wait, this does not make sense. Is this how we stole it? Super weird. Okay. But it makes our life even easier because then we don't have to dig down. So we want to get all tab items here, right? That's basically the first thing that we were trying to achieve. So let's basically say, okay, document.query selector all. Let's get those in and then say, what do we want to do? Tab item. And then we directly iterate over them and say, okay, for each tab element. Right? I'm going to call it element just to be aware of what that is. It's also like something that's useful in naming, especially if you're a beginner. You tend to have namings that make it hard for you to, kind of see what that is, since JavaScript and PHP for that matter can be used very sloppily when it comes to types. It makes sense to name things in a way that will kind of indicate what you're dealing with. There are different thoughts on that, but I personally think that makes sense to basically say, okay, so this is now actually an element, and has like different properties as if it were, I don't know, a node, right? Even though for the most part you will see they have almost the same prototypes. But okay, so let's see here. So what kind of possibilities do we have? We have, this can either be active or not active, right? So what do we want to do here? Well, initially, show, right? So that's maybe something that we should consider of how we're going to do this. So I would say the easiest form to kind of like go about this is to say, hey, you know what? We're going to give this a display of none. Right? And you will notice later that you probably want to avoid this because that's like general markup that you don't really want to deal with, and you want this to kind of let go automatically. But again, this is not about JavaScript. We want to make this as quick and dirty as possible. So basically what we now want to do is to say, okay, so first thing is to say like, well, okay, so if tab element, and then so the weird thing about data is that in JS this is referred to as data set, right? And then we can say data set target. That's not even what I wanted to ask. Actually, what I wanted to ask is that class name a class list dot includes contains, and then I want to say active, right? Then show, right? That's basically what we want to do initially. So then we want to say, okay, what then? Well, then we have to trigger basically the ID, right? That we basically going to generate to. So we already know that, well, hold on a second. So apparently we will need this in multiple things, right? So let's just say, and let's create this maybe out of there. Constant, and we're going to call this target elements, and we're going to make our life super simple and say we're going to make that an object rather than an array. And then we're going to say, okay, so what we do want to do is target elements, and then we're going to take the underlying about. Oh, who's Clown Boots? Oh, and Clown Boots speaks German, right? Hallo Clown Boots. Wie geht's? The Clown Boots, I don't know what the double O stands for, but I guess it refers to, I guess there's a B missing after the double O. Is that the point? Ja, auch schön dich zu sehen. Auch schön dich zu sehen. Was machst du Wochenende? Anyway, so kind of lost my train of thought here. Right. So this is something that we want to do going one deeper, right? So what we have selected now is, of course, this li, and what we really want to do is to say, well, we want to have the target, the data target, and we have to listen on a click event on this, right? So we have to dig a, I'm in my German class right now. Was machst du Wochenende? Oh yeah, Hochen, this is an insider joke that you will not understand, but since you're German too, would you agree that that is not proper German? Yeah, let me actually change the, because I don't know, whenever I have this, I want to basically say, hey, just so people don't think I'm insane, let's switch this over to show others that, you know, people are interacting in the chat. Because you might see this on YouTube, Periscope, or whatever, and I have this combined chat here, which is actually pretty awesome. That is nicht proper German. Correct. It is not proper German. Okay. Oh, sorry, I kind of lost it here right now. What did we say? Okay, yes. So here's the, let's try to concentrate. Actually, might want to get some coffee right now. No, it's not your fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. So what do we want to achieve? We want to basically dig in. So in the tab element, how would we get that, right? So we could probably say, well, this is the first child. But you got to be super careful with JavaScript, because so what you want to do, be aware of. Let's actually, you know, let's dig into the nitty-gritties of this, and say, okay, let's actually right now not worry about that and not worry about that either, and log tab element dot first child and see what happens. Okay, and then you will see what I mean. If I go back to this one and say, okay, let's give us a little bit more space, not too much. We kind of want to see what's going on here and look at the console and then see what's happening. So do you see how those are text nodes, right? Which is kind of weird. So why is that the case? Why is that the case? The first child, I expect the first child right, to be this A. And let's just assume we would have a markup like that and do this again, then all of a sudden you see, okay, now it's my A, right? So that's a little bit of a tricky situation that you always have to account for. And the reason for that is that, so in theory, you created another node in between, and you will likely do that always, depending on you know, how you write. And that's something that you always have to account for, right? That in theory, there could be free text in here, right? To say like, hey, something like this. So just, you know, a common pitfall, not really related to what we're doing here, but that basically means that, okay, this will not work, right? This will not work. We basically have to dig in deeper. So, but it is a direct child. That's what we know, right? That's what we know, and we also know there will only be one of those. So, of course, what we can do is, or actually, let's look at that, is to say like, okay, can we dig in? Yes, of course I have Discord. As a matter of fact, you will probably see that right on top of the screen, right? Where I expect people to be able to type in 7 characters. But because I know that that's a challenge, let me give you a invite link. Hold on. There we go. Yeah. You have to be, yes. I know. Yeah, I know, but the point is like we have to make this you know, you're right? We should basically say, do we really want to avoid? Okay, you know what? You convinced me, because I also have my problems with digging into JavaScript right now, because not because I mean, this is how you would do it, of course, right? You would do a lot of the things that we were talking about with JavaScript, but nonetheless, we have naturally this idea here to say like, hey, well, so let's look at everything from a PHP perspective. So fair enough. Let's do it completely in the backend then. Let's change gears here. I'm not sure if I'm going to regret this, but let's try it out. So let's assume that you're right, and we say, okay, so this is about, no, this is tab about, and this is tab accounts. Okay, and then basically in our about we can say, well, tab is, and let's actually clean this up a little bit. So what are the options here? Well, the options is that we either have a get tab, right? So if is set get tab, well, then get tab, and else we go on default to about. Okay, and here we kind of basically say, okay, and if did I call it tabs or tab? Tab. Tab is about, and here I'm going to say tab is accounts. Okay, and here, of course, we have to create a little bit of a different logic here, right? Where we say, okay, so how do we do this if we do this purely in backend? So what you probably know from front-end frameworks is that you could basically say, well, can't I do classes based on stuff like that? But what I have to do here is I have to basically think about a little bit outside of the box, right? And say, okay, so what I ultimately want to say is a little bit the same as down here, right? So can I write PHP in here is the question. So let's see if we can, and let's figure it out. So basically, if we say if tab equals about, then active, else no. And actually, I don't really know this, so let's figure that out. That'll be super interesting. That'll be super interesting to know. Let's check it out. Okay, so the active state does not work. This, of course, works in general. Okay, but we basically have to make a solution now for the tab is active or not. So let me think. Let me think how we best achieve this. So we have our tabs, and the tabs has a little bit of this. So without a front-end framework, how would I do this? I would probably say, we create a logic. Well, but wouldn't this actually do, so this if, well, okay, so tab is interpreted as a variable. Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Ugh, I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy. Let's do it differently. And say there must be a cleaner solution. There must be a cleaner solution. Let me think about this for a second. So we have, I want to see this. Quickly want to see this. Of course, with our next premise to not run with Xdebug yet, it's going to make our lives a little bit harder. It's not even using MB. Yeah, something is wrong with the version we're using, but I thought we were using the latest. But we're not using the latest of ops, probably. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Looks like an overweight version of you. Not sure what that means. Who, by the way? Or what looks like an overweight version of me? Okay, let's see what we can do about this. So if we can't interpret it like that, then we basically have two possibilities, right? Either we basically create complete ifs with all of this shebang around here, which is kind of stupid. So I want to do this completely different and say, well, hold on a second, can't I generate that instead? Right? Because that's basically what I want to do. So what I really want to do from a high standpoint is to say, okay, let's think this through, right? So my content is basically something that looks a little bit like this, right? Where I say, okay, so I have tabs. Those tabs have a name, and right, whatever that is, and those tabs have content, right? Whatever that is. And that is potentially something that we could say, okay, and now we have 2 of those, right? So in reality, it actually looks like this. And then the question is, okay, where do we get this from? So let's make this really clean and say, okay, so this is something that we could also basically generate based on a very simple process of saying like, okay, those tabs could basically be iterating, and the content is basically the same, right? Where we say, okay, so we generate that based on our iteration. It could even go as far to say like, well, hold on a second, do I really need both contents then if I render them backend anyway? So what are the options that we have in that respect? Well, so either we say, well, you know, why don't we just generate the upper part and leave this as is, or we move this complete thing out and say like, well, why don't we create partials as views for those and basically iterate over that as well, and then think of, and this is maybe a little bit of a philosophical approach, and then basically think about it like, well, hold on a second, don't we want to build a tab system that we can reuse for other occurrences of such a behavior? And the answer to that would probably be yes. But the structure that we have right now here with the basic MVC is basically we're not as deep to say like we're building component based, right? And that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to do that, because I know that's probably going to freak most of you out. So let's keep this an easy solution, and then keep in mind that when the second time we're gonna face this, we're probably going to be talking about the dry principle. So don't repeat yourself, and basically then have to see, hey, hold on a second, let's abstract that up and make this cleaner, right? So what I'm going to do for now is to basically say, okay, let's create those tabs basically like that, and say, all right, and I call this tab navigation, right? And that is going to basically be this here. I don't actually need this, and I'm just going to say, hey, this is simply going to be my name, which is going to be about me, right? And and then that's basically it, right? And then basically this, and my link, that's going to be this, right? And then I have 2 of those. Tab navigation, 2 of those, and can simply say, okay, let's then say accounts, my accounts, and then say, okay, this goes to accounts. Okay, fair enough. And then I can basically say, well, what is this? This is basically an N4, and I say tab navigation, right? Tab navigation as tab. Don't like that naming. Don't like that naming. I'm going to call this tab navigation, I don't know, links. Yep. Just to make a little bit of a, don't like that either, but a little bit happy about it. A little bit happy about it. And Okay, navigation. Damn it, there we go. Okay, and then here, this of course we don't need, and here, this of course we need, and here in the tab we're going to say tab navigation link dot link, right? Dot link, and here we're going to say okay. This we don't need, of course. This we don't need, of course. And here we're going to say tab navigation link dot name. Did we call that name? Yes. Okay. And now the only question here is to, of course, say, well, what happens with the classes? That's a very good point. Did we actually solve the issue? All right. Let's first see if this works like that. Okay, seems to work. So far, so good. Ooh. It's stormy outside. Ooh. Yeah, I quickly have to take care of my trash. You're gonna get some music. Okay. Sorry about that. But you know, if it rains into my trash canister, it's a problem. Anyway, where have we been? Yeah. So we still want to set this active somehow. So how do we get around this? So what we basically want to do is up here, we now need to have a condition of whether or not this is active, right? So what I can do is to basically say, well, hold on. Let's create a class, right? Where we can work with this. So, okay. Class. Let's think about this for a second, how this could look like. It's going to scream at us a little bit. Yep. That was to be expected. Actually, let's quickly fix this before this goes out of hand. Okay. So what we're doing here, right, is basically something where we say like, okay, this can be basically leveraged out a little bit, right? Where we say, hold on, can't we do this before? And of course we can. So let's call this active tab, right? And then here we say, yeah, this defines our active tab, and then instead we're going to use that one here. And what we want to do here is then basically to say, okay, so hold on, this is then either active, right? If active tab is the same as about, right? Or as the link, basically, right? So we're going to write this manually here. We could actually write a little bit of an iteration here and basically compare those. But here, I already know. And so what I'm going to basically say is, okay, if active tab is about, then active. Ooh, what is going on? Then active, else nothing. All right, and can do the same thing here. And of course here with accounts. And as soon as I would, so here it's bearable, right? I already see that there's a little bit of repetition in here. So if we get more tabs, then we probably want to talk about this too. What could we do to automate this, right? So of course we can basically say, hey, what is really distinct? Only those two are distinct, right? Where I say like, okay, there's a name and a link. So the class I could basically generate, right, with a for each, right? So just from a clean perspective, again, I think it's a little bit of an overkill here with two, but let's try it out, right? And say, okay, so programmatically, I would basically say, I don't need to do this. I can basically say for each tab navigation link is tab navigation link. Yeah, that makes sense. And then basically say, okay, so let's assume this is not here, right? And then could basically say, well, so tab navigation links, let's do this as I'm actually going to show you something because that's pretty interesting in PHP how that behaves. So what's the difference between this class equals and this, right? This is something that you can try out, and this will only be interesting for people who write in different languages as well. The question of whether or not PHP uses the iteration object as per reference or as a copy is something that breaks the logic of other languages. If you ever play around with it, you will notice that you know, like for example, in most other languages, you would have to refer to it like this, right? So that's why I basically use this pattern, because it's an easier pattern to basically cope with many other languages. So well, for example, JavaScript, right, where you would basically say that's how I would have to refer to it to actually change navigation links. So let's keep that pattern. And then what do we say here? And then here I can basically do this, right, and say, okay, so if what is active tab? If active tab equals navigation link link, then active and else not, right? And then I don't need this, right? So now we have basically done this programmatically. Again, like with two links, I mean, you can do stuff like that or not. I mean, it's more or less a question of what saves you more time. Because from a processing standpoint, writing it manually, of course, avoids another for each, right? So it's actually in this case more performant to just write it manually. Anyway. So that should give us everything we want, right? We're done here with our for, I guess. Where did we do this? The class, yes. So this should basically work. Hi, Banana. How are you doing? And what do we want to do here? This one. And now we can see, okay, cool, now it seems to be actually active. See that? I mean, we probably want to give this a little bit more of a padding here, but the general purpose is basically fulfilled. Coding with Ruby on Rails. Nope. Doing PHP here. Oh, that's what you're doing. You're coding with Ruby on Rails. Good for you. Good for you. The Ruby on Rails is an interesting concept. And not as popular as one might think, right? I'm actually kind of surprised because so if the question is something like Django or something like Ruby on Rails, then Ruby on Rails is basically the way to go from my perspective. But with the popularity of Python, I guess, and Ruby more or less being a little bit of a side, I don't know. I mean, Ruby developers, I haven't actually seen a Ruby developer in a long time, but that might be my bubble. Sent you something on Wizen. Check it out when you can. We'll do Clown Boots. We'll do. It's from my work. Okay, so yeah, you kind of have to. Then I guess that's not a choice anyway. But nonetheless, I mean, I like Ruby on Rails. You had zero experience. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of difficult, right? If I kind of hate that they do that too in everything, right? It's kind of like, so I have a student now in Wizen that basically, like, after 3 weeks of JavaScript, he has to jump on React, which is a relatively complex framework for somebody who doesn't write code before. But yes, and Clown Boots, not everyone on this channel is German. Right, that's just M. Hokum and myself. Yeah, I know. It's really sad. It's really sad. Even though, I mean, oh, he's Dutch. Well, then pretty close. So Dutch is basically the and forgive my ignorance, but basically something between German and English. Representing Slovenia. Yes, cool. Slovenia. Actually, so Slovenia is a place I know next to nothing about. I passed it on my way to Croatia, and that's all I can say is that the landscape was beautiful, and that's it. That's unfortunately it. Anyway, welcome everyone. Let's see if we can get back to do a little bit of work here. So, again, so I'm not going to go into the CSS things. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you could do yourself. So for now, it simply works, right? So, what we want to talk about though is to say, like, okay, so we're now getting into the point of basically generating a already like very distinct functionality, and we were not done with what we actually need to do when we say, like, okay, so what kind of structure are we using? So if I were to work together with someone, then I still have this problem to say, like, okay, so I have my models and they all work fine, and I've got my database, but if I sent this over now, and maybe some of you tried that, and check out the Git repo of this little series, and then notice that, well, hold on, what kind of tables do I need? Right, and that is basically what I would like to talk to you about. But let's first see what's going on here. Visited sometime, it'll be worth it. Absolutely. I've heard very good things about Slovenia. I'm just going to be honest. I don't see it likely to happen, at least soon. Especially now, not currently, where I'm basically locked into not only my country but my very house. Okay, I don't know if you have any experience with Ruby on Rails or something similar, but I'm running a background job, and my idea is to pull in a view with JavaScript to check when it's done. It's done when DB datetime field has been updated, but I don't know if that's the best way. So not sure what you're doing. If you're running a background job, and you want to inform the front end, then you could look into something like sockets. Oh, pulls a job monitor controller function, which checks the database and returns JSON. Yeah, okay, but what in how do you do that? Like in an interval and just check every 5 seconds? Like every X seconds, yeah. So that's kind of a I want to say an anti-pattern, right? So there are two things that you could potentially do, and the easiest one is to say, well, shouldn't the backend job, when it's done, so to speak, create some form of an event that would trigger the front end to know what's going on, right? And that would you can even outsource that, right? And say like it's going to call a webhook, and then you just use some kind of push service that you can easily integrate if you have not so much experience, and then that tells your front end that, hey, okay, now we're done, and then the JavaScript basically asks for the specifics of the job, right? And then creates an API call to your backend that says like, okay, now let's get the data. That's probably the easiest implementation, if you ask me. All of those every X seconds things will eventually become an issue, right? Especially if from a scalability standpoint, imagine everybody would do that, right? So you have X users online, and they're all like going crazy, having their browser windows open, and so on, right? And unreliable anyway, right? And because you got to make really sure that your interval is also stopped. So I'm not sure if that made sense to you, what I just said, but that's basically how it would try to implement it. Right. Okay. So anyway, let's talk migrations. I have no idea how many users will use this, but I agree that polling might be an issue over something. Yeah. So I don't so the jobs that you basically created, right? I'm not sure what they're doing. Anyway, so if a datetime field has been updated, so if you check for particular updates. And why is that triggered by a job in the first place? On a big chunk of data. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, then you would do that. Then you would do that. Okay. Yeah, then yeah, something like a socket would basically probably be the way to go, right? And say, okay, if that's done, then something else happens. And you just make a call somewhere and say, hey, I updated. Right? In a very very simple form. Okay. Where have we been? Okay. So what are the two things that people normally do, right? So there are two things that you might consider when we're talking about like databases in general and how to basically collaborate on them. One would basically be, okay, how to maintain a schema. So how our tables basically look like. And the second one, and that depends on what you want to do, is, okay, how do you maintain data? So, and that's more for if you move from one server to the next or have multiple servers running that basically need to sync between each other and so on. So that's a complex topic. So the whole seeding process and so on is something that we're simply not going to do. Okay, simply not going to do. What we are going to do is to say like, no, the thing that we are concerned about is the schema. And the most primitive form, right? And let's maybe start with that. The most primitive form, of course, is to say, well, can I not simply create something like that? And let's do that and say, hey, let's create a schema.sql. And then, actually, let's be a little bit careful here. We've not been good with our So that has been merged in. I quickly need to basically, no, wait, that's the newest branch. That's fine. That's the newest. Fine. Let me quickly do something here. Finishing routes. Quickly have to, yep. Quickly have to do this. So this is secure routes. Finishing basic view of about. Okay, let's quickly do that one. And in that case, I can. This will not interfere, so let's just commit for now. Let's just commit for now and then create a new branch. And what we're going to say, migration. Okay, and this is where we basically can now say, oh, no, not this ugly crap. This is where we can say git add. Okay. Okay. So what we could basically do is, of course, say like, hey, let's use the database tools, and you will have that depending on whatever you're using, right? So let's just assume you're using your PHP MyAdmin or your what's it called? This Microsoft Workbench. It's called Workbench, I think so, or Heidi or whatever you're playing around with. You can probably have something that will basically generate you your current output here, right? So I can actually output this to single files. There's a lot of things that I can actually do here, but I'm going to make this as primitive as possible on this is basically this. Okay. Let's default to that. This is basically the most primitive thing, to basically say, okay, create this, right? And then we can do something like, well, if not exists, exists. There we go. Interesting how this has a different thing here. And then let's think it through. So let's imagine somebody would actually come in and completely run an installation. So how I would basically do that is to say, okay, create database, right? If not exists, and then I have my database name, which in my case is going to be PHP Basics. Okay, and then I'm going to say use that. Okay, regardless, and then I can basically run this, right? So in theory, when people basically use this, I can basically now say, okay, MySQL, access denied, right? There we go. Okay, and now I can basically say something like, okay, source schema.sql. Okay, and of course nothing really happened other than the use command. It did not do anything. Actually created a warning, database changed, which is kind of weird, but okay. And that's basically everything with this if not exists, that basically will not generate anything for me because I have this markup. So let's do something interesting and say, well, what if we rename this, right? Can we basically get something out of here? If I rename this, will it generate a new database just to make sure it works? And we probably should do this, right? So this is really primitive testing here, and say PHP Basics test, and same here, and see what it does now. Let's get this up here, maybe clear everything and go. bump, bump. And now say, okay, I need to reload this. And I need to do this apparently. I haven't done that. Interesting. Okay. Oh, and my RAMs are killing me. And here I can see, okay, look at that. Right, that looks cool. Apparently, I have my post and my users in my basics test. Right, so that seems to work fine. Cool. Very happy with it. So let's revert this. So this is basically the most basic way to basically give somebody else my database. Now let's think about this though, right? So what are basically the challenges with this approach? Well, first of all, this cannot really be run programmatically nicely. So somebody would probably paste this into you know, some kind of again PHP admin or Heidi SQL and so on, and or run it like I did in the terminal, and all of that would kind of work fine and dandy. But now imagine you keep on working on the project, okay, and all of a sudden you notice that, hey, you know what? So my titles here, those 200 signs, they don't work for me anymore, right? They need to be 255. So if I make changes here in the SQL, right, then, and would run this again, then none of that would actually change anything. Why? Well, because this only runs if this table does not exist. So I have no way of being able to keep track of changes that I made to this database, right, in the running process. So let's just say my other developer basically already has this table, and now I made changes, and now I basically need a way to say, well, okay, how will that basically be updated and or even versioned, right, in the longer scope of things. And that's basically the question. And what people did is they wrote different migration libraries to tackle this issue. And the next time we're going to look into how those libraries work, and going to basically take someone. I looked around a little bit, and so the most primitive form is how Cake PHP does it. But I'm not really happy with it, so I'm gonna find a little bit of a better library that is still as simple as it can be. So that's basically going to be a little bit the challenge and my homework. But what we're going to do for now is to basically say, okay, hold on a second. So the whole README, right, is basically something that gets our startup, and our startup, on the other hand, contains basically basic database setups, for example, right? So what we can do, at least, right, is to say, okay, but can we not at least have a installation script that would automate that for me? And that's something that we can, of course, do, right? Let's actually do this and think about what that would do, right? So let's say install. Add this to Git and say, okay, so what do we require? We require actually only two things, right? One is the vendor autoload, and one is our startup. And then the only thing we need is to say, okay, let's create a really stupid query. Do I have a multi-query? Yeah. I need to run this in that case, where I basically say, okay, what is this? This is going to be file get contents of the schema, of the current directory in that case, just make it clean, and then the schema SQL. Done. Okay, And if we've done that, then we have actually the following scenario where we can go into a README and basically walk people through a basic installation. So what would that installation be? Right? Let's write about that maybe. And say, okay, first, so don't forget that the .env file doesn't exist in the project, right? So we say create a .env file based on, did we provide an example? Yes, based on example.env. Let's make this a little bit codey here. And second thing we're gonna do is set up your database credentials in startup.php. And then run or visit install.php. Okay, done. That's basically it. And that's how you basically get this program to run wherever you are, right? At least for the first time. And again, if we make schema changes, that's something that we have to dig a little bit deeper into. But I guess for now, let's conclude here and basically say, okay, great, install PHP and schema SQL. Let's take this out here quickly. I'm having the .idea in the, it doesn't matter. Yep. Let's commit that one. And then update readme to reflect, whatever, to reflect, or to offer installation guide. Okay. And then I'm going to get all of this stuff in so you can actually use it. All right, we should have no conflicts here. Okay, cool. And well, I guess I'll see you next time, where we gonna basically see how we tackle all the bottlenecks we talked about today. And until then, I hope you have a successful and productive day. Thanks for watching.